Hello, afternoon. Welcome along to today's session celebrating International Women's Day, as it has been this week. We are breaking taboos, women, changing broadcasting. Before we meet our guest, a little bit of housekeeping for you, just to let you know that the Radio Academy have recently launched a new podcast, which is very exciting. It's now available on all your usual podcast apps. Each week, Roisin Hastie goes behind the scenes of a different radio project to find out how they made it and what they learned. It's always good to learn new things. This week's episode, for example, covers the recent tragic death of Jamal Edwards by speaking to the One Extra Breakfast presenter, Nadia J, and her producer, Adele Cross, about how they covered the story throughout the day. Obviously, a massive fan base there. That was really important that they got that right. So I'm sure that will be completely fascinating. Recent episodes also cover projects at Fun Kids, Radio 2, Greatest Hits Radio. And if you just search for the Radio Academy podcast on your favorite podcast app and platform, you will find it eventually. Okay, everybody relax. The parish notices are done. We can begin. On we go with our conversation together. So for those of you who I've never met, hello, my name is Emma B. I am at Magic Radio. You can just see in the back there, the yellow and the blue. 1 till 4, Mondays to Fridays. Is a crack and listen, just saying. I'm going to be here today talking to some fabulous women. And you may have seen me popping up, heard me over the airwaves for many years now. I started at Radio 1. I've been on Heart and Smooth, and now I'm here at Magic. But it was really at Radio 1 where I spent most of my time presenting the Sunday Surgery. It's about 20 years ago now, I can't believe it. And I think it's safe to say that we were breaking some pretty astonishing boundaries then, but the good news is that we have come a very long way. So today's panel brings together Anna Raeburn, the brilliant Anna Raeburn. Hello, Anna, it's lovely to have you with us, and podcaster Sangeeta Pillai, and myself, and each of us, hello, and each of us, I think, I sound really sort of like overly confident saying this, but it's true that we've all really played a part in pushing the boundaries in broadcasting, I think, over the last half a century, from days before the internet, right through to the millions of podcasts that are now available online. So, and I'm really looking forward to this because I think that, there's one very strong theme that the three of us have in common. So we're going to have a little unpick the idea of what it's like to become a confidant for listeners. To be that person they trust you with to discuss those subjects that were previously off limits. So Anna, we have Anna Raeburn, the legend Anna Raeburn, household name as Radio Agony aunt, but author, writer, now blogger as well, and the Sunday Surgery certainly wouldn't have existed without the trailblazing work that Anna did beforehand. And Sangeeta Pillai, who presents the brilliant Masala Podcast, a feminist podcast exploring cultural taboos, which is just so addictive and so fascinating. And you do it so brilliantly, Sangeeta. Such a warm and welcoming environment. Activist and writer as well. She's a busy lady, but welcome both. It's lovely to have you here.
Thank you.
Absolutely lovely to be here. Thank you so much.
Anna, I'm going to start with you. Because we just had a little chat actually previously, because the sort of the idea, even the concept of being an agony aunt off air or on air was really, really new. Was this a very structured plan that you had when this all started?
No, this is horses for courses. I was the girl at school that other girls went to and asked. I was the girl in the typing pool that other typists came to and asked. I was the girl who always looked and sounded as if she knew, so she went off and found out and made jolly sure she did. But no, there was no plan. I had applied for a job as an agony aunt in a magazine. I had applied for a postgraduate course, which I wasn't going to be taken in on because I hadn't got a graduate degree. And I went to Capital, which at that time was looking for programs in 20-minute segments. And I offered them a segment on this and a segment on that and a segment on talking about problems. And I was interviewed extensively. I kept my famous temper. I think I lost 7 pounds in sweat. And eventually, they're not going to have me. In the process of my first divorce, who am I? What? Go away. Okay. I got the job at Woman, and 6 weeks later, the telephone rang and a voice said, "This is," whoever it was, I'm not being rude, I can't remember the name, "that idea you had." So I said, "Yes, it's mine." And the voice said, "Yeah, we know, we want you to come and do it." And so I began 14 years of Wednesday, 14 years of 2 hours where you said, "This is what we do." I don't know who thought up, I wish I did, Emma. Somebody thought up, quote, "personal, sexual and emotional problems," unquote. I didn't, but I would thank them on my bended knees, because if you put sex at the beginning, it would have been different. If you put sex at the end, it would have been different, but you put it in the middle in between, personal and emotional, and it has a different impact. And I began.
I mean, it was quite, not only when you first started doing this, were those sort of subjects off limits within amongst friends, even within amongst friends, but to be able to confidently deliver your plan to a huge radio station and say, "This is what I want to do," take some balls, Anna.
Well, I don't think it was actually balls. I think those are the other things. I think that if you have a face like mine, people automatically presume that you are actually going to take no prisoners. The fact that I go away and throw up from nerves doesn't interest anybody. So fine. So I went in and I talked, and they talked back, and we learned something, and I went away. When I began to do it, what I knew, which we've all talked about off air, which we will now talk about on air, is that people want to talk. They want to talk to Sangeeta, they want to talk to you, Emma, they want to talk to all sorts of people, because they're not their mums or their aunts or their mother's best friend or their older sister or their older brother, story there, or the doctor, or somebody that you're going to see at the shops, or somebody you're going to have to sit across the table from. This is that woman at the end of a line. And so there is space for you to talk about something in a completely different way. You get to say what you really wanted to say, which is how foolish you feel, or how sad you feel, or how lost you feel, which you wouldn't have said to all sorts of other people, and you wouldn't say if you ever thought you were ever going to meet these people. I have spent my life with people saying, "It's you, isn't it?" And I've said, "Really? But who do you think I am?" "Well, I know that voice." "Well, okay." And I've gone away and left them alone. Why does it work? Well, it works because you don't have to meet me. You don't have to know me. You don't have to think about whether you like my perfume or why I wear those awful shoes. It just, I'm just that voice. The wonderful thing about radio is the mixture of absolute intimacy and complete anonymity. It's fab.
You've absolutely nailed it, and you really have. It's a gift for talking radio is, airwaves, podcasting is. Sangeeta, is that does some of that resonate with you in terms of Anna saying that she was that person that people came to, because you describe yourself pretty much as an accidental podcaster?
Massively. I mean, if you'd told me even 5 years ago, let alone 5-year-old Sangeeta living in Mumbai, because I grew up in a very traditional family, grew up in the slums of Mumbai. The best I could hope for in my life was some man would marry me and kind of take me out. And that was my life. That's what I was told. So to be in a place now where other people trust me with the things that are happening to them, sometimes difficult things, and to then be given space or access to their lives in this particular way feels like a huge privilege. And, I, as a podcaster, I think what you said very rightly, very accidental. About 3 years ago, I was typing into Google, "What is a podcast?" I kid you not. I really am. So I was doing these workshops for South Asian women. So I used to work in advertising for many, many years, came to the UK about 16 years ago. And when I was working there, I was like, I need to do something else. This doesn't feel right, and starting to think about that, I went through like this huge mental health breakdown. Coming out of that, I started to do some workshops and getting South Asian women into rooms to talk about some of the stuff that we experience, whether that was sex or, periods, or all the taboos that we are not allowed to discuss. And I was thinking of what else could I do that would bring this out into the world in a bigger way than a workshop. And I started thinking about radio, and that felt too difficult. And then I was like, oh, this podcast thing sounds quite interesting. And literally by accident, entered a competition with Spotify. They were trying to find more women of color podcasters. On the last day, I think someone sent it to me on Facebook. Sent in a pitch, which was 2 sentences. Happened to hear back. I think I was one of 700 people. I think there was out of 700, I think 10 of us were shortlisted that year. Got put into this podcasting boot camp, learned a little bit about what it was, and started to do Masala Podcast. It was completely, unbelievable to me now, sitting here talking to you. Even when you said, Emma, at the beginning that we're broadcasters, there's that sense of like, who's Emma talking about? That's not me.
And I think, like, listening to the podcast as well, the passion that is so frequently displayed in the way that some of your guests speak, there was obviously a massive appetite for this because in like so many industries, South Asian women are just, criminally underrepresented, and it just, I think for all three of us, lifting the lid on some of these issues, we've all been at that point where you go, wow, these people want to talk. They really want to talk, which brings me back to Anna, because I think, Anna, it's really, I think it's really worth, excuse me, explaining what the temperature was like when you started in the 70s and 80s about talking about these things, these taboo subjects, women's issues. There was nothing really else like it, was there?
No, and it was fine if you talked about it. There were set ways you could talk about it. You could talk about it frightfully formally because you were a medical practitioner or a specialist. You could talk about it as a dirty joke because that was accepted. You could talk about it with your close, very close friend. I say it singular because I don't think you have 26 of them. I think you have 1 or 2 if you're really lucky. And you could but you might not get the information you needed. So the tone of this, which you're very good at, the tone of this is actually the thing that's important. We all have different voices, but we have quite specific tones which have meant something to enormous numbers of people who've said, well, I may not like her, but at least she'll do her best. I may not like her, but she's honest. When I went to talkRADIO years after Capital, we were opening mail, and a letter came out with a tiny little box with a piece of wedding cake in it. And I opened the letter, and the letter said, "Dear Anna Raeburn, I was one of your first callers at Capital, and I did not like you. I did not like what you said. I thought you were tough and unforgiving. And when I put the phone down, I went off and did another 3 weeks of the life that I'd already been living. And then I thought, oh, boo. And I packed 2 suitcases and I took my daughters, and we lived in a mobile home until I qualified. And both girls are now in university. And this piece of wedding cake is from the wedding that I would never have had if you hadn't been so all-fired rude to me all those years ago." And you think, this is not a popularity contest. You do occasionally say really unforgiving, tough, difficult things to people, and they are not fools. They know why you're doing it. They don't think you're being beastly. They do think you're being beastly, but they know that it's for a point. And you travel. So yes, but I really, Emma, honestly, I didn't think about what anybody else was doing. I never have.
No.
Other people in the business, fine. It's a big business. Good luck. Fine, no problem. But just leave me to do this bit, because I'm absolutely serious about this. I think it's fantastic, and I want to do it the very best way that I can. I'm the daughter and granddaughter of teachers, and my mother only saw me work in the studio at Capital once. And we came down the stairs. She didn't speak halfway down the stairs. I thought, oh God, this is going to be very difficult. We got down the stairs and I said, "You haven't said anything." And she said, "Well, it's just like your father." And I started to laugh. "What do you mean?" She said, "Because you're absolutely determined. There's a bridge between you and whoever you're talking to, and that bridge is going to be open, it's going to be solid, and they're going to make steps towards you and you're going to make steps towards them. That's it. And you must have done this, Emma, because it was still new. It's always new. It's always new to a whole group of people, even to the people who think they know. And one of the things that drives me mad, all three of us, I'm sure, feel, nowadays, there is all the vocabulary. I'm not sure that the emotional contexts are any better known than they ever were.
100%.
I took care of 2 children in the United States. They had a vocabulary to die for. They didn't know the impact of most of those words. This is what we're up against.
100%. Absolutely. Absolutely. I think there's just talking a little bit about that sort of pact that you make with the people that you're talking to. And Sangeeta, I can hear the frustration in so many of your guests, that even though it's 2022, for so many of your guests, these are still really not talked about subjects. And there is a pact that you have, that you sort of alluded to there, about that trust, that I am going to be honest with you, and you're going to be honest with me, and we're going to have this really honest discussion. And it's sometimes it is and you used a word earlier, Sangeeta, which is privilege. And for me, it's always been, felt very much like a privilege to have people trust you. How have you gone about deciding what subjects you're going to cover, and the guests that you've spoken to, Sangeeta? How have you drawn those conversations out?
So to me, it's a really organic process. So I don't have a list. I'm not looking at celebrities. It's not any of that. I find people on social media who have interesting stories. And the thing I'm after is authenticity. If somebody is willing to kind of really open themselves up to me, because I do that with them as well. And when we could, I'd invite them over to my kitchen table, literally make them a cup of chai. And we'd sit across. I'd put the microphone kind of in between us. And it was literally as if we were having a discussion. And I think the thing I look for, and I do like a pre-interview call, is literally that one word. It's a very overused authenticity, but that's what I'm after. I'm not interested in kind of people's personas or what they present or any of that. I just want to know what is it really like for you? Whatever your life experiences, whatever your trauma, whatever your difficulty, talk to me. How does it feel? And often I will talk about a particular thing that it resonates with me as well. And I'm very open, I'm very vulnerable. And I think that in turn allows them the space to be vulnerable back to me. Yeah. And I think that's what you hear. I think that purity almost of a conversation.
But what you're also describing, if I may say so, is an absolutely perfect USP. You're offering something that is special, and you're offering it to this person, and this person is offering it back. And that's what you were talking about, Emma. When we do these things, we do them. Yes, there is trust and there is bond. And when the trust is betrayed, you can't work. I spent a year. I've just spent a year with a woman who wants me to tell her all sorts of things, and you tell her you're not going to do any of it. Wants it to happen by magic. Does not want to have to go through the dreadful business of coming to terms with that and discarding that and putting this down, because that's all too much like hard work, and it isn't actually in the romances when you read them.
Anna, in those early days when you were at Capital, and that was an absolute an appointment. Listen, the nation was tuned in to this program. What were the discussions that you had? I'm going to make you laugh because this is commercial radio. We're talking about commercial radio. I was going to say, what discussions did you have with your team? I'm guessing there was no team, and it was you that was directing the flow.
There was no team, and I was terribly, I think when I look back, I was terribly unaware. The energy that was driving me was the energy to do my best. If you would help me do my best, that's fine. If you got in my way, I'd roll right over you and go straight on. There was a time where, once the show was established, we got up to 16 people answering calls. So the lines opened an hour before we went to air. They called in, they had a sheet of paper, we took a name, a telephone number, and an outline of the problem. And we did everything on ringback. So some of those were passed over to the producer and she said, I want that one, I don't want that one, whatever it was. I was never very interested in that. All I knew was you heard it 16 seconds slower than I did. And in 16 seconds, I can't stop you swearing. If you're going to say something dreadful, like I've taken the pills, which has happened, we're going to have to move real fast to handle that, on air, off air, with the person, whatever, because there's a radio station involved. I was not, I really never, I was grateful to them. The most wonderful thing, Emma, which you'll laugh at me, was the man who was my engineer, who was the most beautiful Frenchman, who I never took any notice of because he was the engineer. I'm working. And I met him at the Capital Radio 40-year celebration. He walked up, kissed me firmly on both cheeks and said, I've waited years to do that. And I said, oh, good, me too. Not interested as an engineer, get on with it, do it. I'm working.
I think the one of the joys as well about talking about emotional subjects that are difficult is you never quite know where it's going to go. Oh. And I'm very sure, Sangeeta, you've had times when you've thought a conversation is going to go one way and we're going to talk about this, whether that's arranged marriage or condoms or birth control, and it's taken a completely different turn. How do you deal with that when that happens?
So I kind of have a loose structure and then I let the conversation flow, and it's almost like pure instinct to see kind of where it goes. And I think, Anna, you said this in the call when we were talking before, you can feel that moment when something clicks or something shifts. One of the conversations that I remember just off the top of my head is there's a South Asian porn star who I interviewed for one of the episodes, and we're talking about porn in South Asian culture, right? And she was talking about, how she's a Muslim South Asian woman and the family didn't know, and she was on Babe Station, and, suddenly there's a call that comes through. She picks up the phone and it's her mother on the phone. And she's saying to the producer, cut the call. She doesn't want to. She's like, I'm prancing around in my underwear on the sofa on Babe Station, and my mother's on the other side. Oh, bless her. So, that was completely unexpected. I wasn't expecting her to say that. So obviously we went with it, and it was a brilliant episode. And there was another thing she talks about as well, about, she was also a sex worker at some point in her career. Mm-hmm. And one of her regular customers was an imam at the mosque. Yes.
Oh, she's so young. Emma, she's a baby. Go on.
And so she says, this imam would come over, and I'm not sure I'm allowed to say this. I don't know how far you want me to go, but the imam liked carrots up his bum. And so she was talking about that. I was like, oh my God. And I didn't want to interrupt her, and I kept making that, and I didn't want to laugh or anything, So she would go on, and she said, yes, he like the carrot up his bum, and then he'd kind of get washed and he'd go off to the mosque. He went to lead prayer. And I just thought, oh my God, these stories. So, yeah, a lot of them, particularly this episode, went off on these incredibly, amazing tangents. And I think that the skill and the joy of being somebody who's holding the microphone is to allow people to go to those places that are interesting. And yet these, both of you are kind of consummate professionals, sometimes to pull it back when it's kind of meandering endlessly, but sometimes allow it to kind of go to where it needs to go.
There was the number of stories. I think that was the other thing, isn't it, about Anna, with the guests and the people that you will have spoken to over the many years that you've been doing this. And on the Sunday Surgery, we would often talk to these really awkward teenagers about physiological stuff, biological stuff that they were just excruciatingly embarrassed about, but couldn't go to mum and dad, couldn't go to their carers or whoever they were living with, couldn't go to school, most certainly couldn't go to their peer group. And there were lots of times where you'd be like, oh my, these kids, this person has just been walking around with this in their head for months and months and months and months and months. How that affects people. And my favorite, well, it wasn't my favorite, but the most common question that people used to ask me outside of the show was, don't these people have any friends? And I'm like, you're missing the point entirely in these conversations. Can I just say as well, if you're listening at home, please feel free to ask any questions. You can send them on, and that you can send them. Can you send them in, Laura? I'm just talking to the clever people behind the scenes here. Yes, you can send. You should be able to send them in now if you just click on the slide on the right of the screen. But we won't be answering any intimate sex questions today, where you have to book privately for that.
That's a very good point.
Yes, Anna,
it's
exactly.
Not about your friends. It's not about your friends. That's why, you have all the cliches about women who talk to their hairdressers and men who talk to the man in the bar or their barber. These are relationships of some kind of frequency, some kind of intimacy, but they also have space in them.
Yeah.
And radio simply gives you more space because they don't see you. I mean, I will remember for the rest of my life with the greatest possible affection the taxi driver who suddenly looked at me in the back of the car and said, "You're her. I didn't dream you had pins like that." And we laughed and laughed. I was so thrilled. Nobody ever noticed my legs. Hooray! It was wonderful, but it's about space. And that space is very necessary. And I would imagine one of the things, Sangeeta, that you very gracefully flipped all those years in advertising to one side, but you must have had from that, I don't know what you did, perhaps you'll tell us, but one of the things you got from that was this amazing ability to offer while appearing to do absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
That's very clever. I admire that.
Thank you. Yes. I think you learn. I used to be a copywriter. So you learn how to talk to people in ways that they understand best.
Yes.
And I think that's the skill you develop as a copywriter. And I think I probably carried that through to the podcast.
Yes.
I don't know how whether as well, Sangeeta, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I think there's, Anna, I understand that space, the gift, the gift of that space of radio, but we have come a very long way in terms of publicly being able to show vulnerability, whether that is through the considerable and well needed campaigns around mental health, whether there've been huge efforts to get people talking more. It's almost quite cool to appear to be vulnerable now. But I wonder whether or not that is really translating into whether that's translating into hard fact, as in, do we still need that space? Do we still need those areas, whether that's podcasting or whether that's on the radio, to be able to explore these? And there is still huge value in listening to these stories. Sangeeta, you've probably benefited with your podcast with this ability, people being much happier to expose their vulnerable side.
Absolutely. And I think vulnerability, I think of as almost like a secret weapon. Mm-hmm. People think of vulnerability as used to, and I think it's changing, but very slowly, as a weakness, to be seen, to be vulnerable, particularly in South Asian culture. We've been taught over and over again that don't show vulnerability because somebody will use it. But actually, it's completely the other way around. So when I talk on the podcast, I suffer from kind of mental health issues. I've got anxiety, PTSD, and I talk about that a lot. Each time I do that, the flurry of messages I get on social media, on email, and the same for guests who've done that. Yes. They've said, such thing happened to me and it was really painful. I mean, people write in from the UK, from India, from different places to say, I heard you, I was in my car. I turned on Spotify, I heard your voice, or I heard a guest's voice saying such and such. Oh my God, that happened to me. thank you for saying that because I feel less alone. And that phrase, I feel less alone, is repeated over and over and over again, because that's what, that's what we do. I think we make people feel
I
less
don't think
alone
this
by
will ever go.
sharing. Sorry, go on, Anna.
I beg your pardon. I'm so sorry. I
No,
thought
no,
you.
no, no, no.
I'm
Go
so
on, go
sorry.
on. It's
I just think I don't think this will ever go. And
Yeah.
I think it's so interesting that when John Sopel, who's had a 40-year career at the BBC and is a very good journalist, television journalist, and Emily Maitlis, very distinguished career, television, news media thing. When they leave and they go to radio, there's a kind of, yeah. Because my mother used to say, radio is portable. You can take it from the kitchen to the bathroom and shut the door.
Yes.
You can take it at the bottom of the garden. You can take it in the car. I had a whole group of women when I used to work in the afternoons who used to talk to me before they picked up the children from school, because that was a safe time. He wasn't around, they weren't around, and it was private. Yes? I don't think this is ever going to change. And I think that the power of radio is about to be rediscovered. I think it's kind of cyclic. It goes in and out, tidal. And here we go, we're going to have another tidal wave of it. Because although the cameras are available and we are much more used to them because they're on the phone and so on and so forth, there is still a wonderful thing about only hearing a voice, because you make a picture of the person. I have to say that the people, I really loved my audience. They made me 3 inches taller, at least a stone slimmer, and they gave me a waist. Isn't that wonderful, waist? They were sweet. They had and the wonderful woman that I met at an antiques fair who said to me, "Why is your voice familiar?" So I said, "I did years of radio. I loved radio." "Would I know your name?" So I said, "Possibly. My name's Anna Raeburn." "I've got to get my mother." And do you know what she said? "I thought you were going to be at least 5'8", 5'10". "I thought you were going to have a face like a Valkyrie." I said, "I have." She said, "You weren't what I was expecting at all." And her mother said, "You're really pretty."
Oh my gosh, what sort of a comment is that, for goodness sake?
I laughed and laughed and laughed. I just, come on, just laugh. It's fine. But that important point that you've made, Emma, this is not going to go away. This is not done because we finally, after 40 years I have invigilated, begin to have sexual education in this country, which we could actually put our hands on and be proud of. It's only just beginning. We've been talking about it for 40 years, and it will miss significant groups of people, either because their parents pull them out of school and say they don't want them to do this, or because the teacher doesn't do it very well, doesn't teach it very well. And they will always come back. They will come back to Sangeeta, they will come back to Emma, they will come back to me, because I shall be long gone, pushing up daisies and wishing you all well. But I don't think this is something that you can ever say that it will be resolved and finished. It isn't finished ever.
I think as well, Sangeeta, there's you're absolutely right, Anna. And Sangeeta, you mentioned that safe space.
Yeah.
And without blowing our trumpets too much, because it's the people that we speak to that give us our stories and give us.
Oh yes, without them we're nothing.
Without them we're nothing. And we thank them constantly for their honesty and their generosity with sharing their stories with us. However, saying that, without trying to sound like we're blowing our trumpets too much, some of the conversations that we have are life-changing. And for some of the people that you speak to, Sangeeta, the consequences of saying things out loud can be significant. That's a real honor to have that. How do you manage that yourself, being given this information that has that can have potentially lots of ripples for them on a personal basis in their communities?
So I think for me, the guest feeling safe is the penultimate thing. So it's one to get a really good interview and be authentic and empathetic and all of that. But I think for them to feel safe is really, really important. So I always say, this is a conversation that we're having. If there's anything at any point that you feel uncomfortable sharing, come back to me and we'll edit it out. And that's my word.
Mm-hmm.
So, that then gives them the sense of safety to then carry on and say these things. I think the other thing, Anna, you said, and I wanted to come back to that, is one, the intimacy of audio, right? You're in someone's ear and you're whispering into their ear kind of your deepest, darkest, and the guest's deepest, darkest thoughts and emotions. The other thing that's really pertinent to South Asian culture is we don't hear our voices. South Asian women, we're very invisible. We're very quiet. We're invisible and quiet in our own communities because we've been told to keep quiet and let the men talk for us. We are quiet within kind of British media, Western media, if you will, because we're only like the terrorist's wife or the shopkeeper's assistant or whatever, you know? So having a voice within media when you haven't had a voice for a long time is life-changing. To hear someone like me, for someone sitting in, say, Birmingham or wherever, to hear someone like me with my accent saying words that they may never have heard said on radio. I talk about saris, I talk about samosas, I talk about sex, I talk about porn, right? But in the language, I might say a Hindi word, which is why I think, Anna, you were talking about what is a bad beti. I think that the purpose of that is to say a bad beti is a bad daughter, because we've all grown up being told you're the good daughter, you're the good wife. And I'm kind of turning it on its head and say we're bad betis and we're proud to be bad betis. Yes. So to hear that on a platform like Spotify or Apple, it gives it so much validity for them to say, oh my God, that's my language. And I'm hearing someone say that to me in an accent that I understand. Is huge. You cannot imagine how profoundly life-changing that is.
And I guess when you were, sorry, Anna, and I guess when Anna, when you were starting, you know, this off, so many years ago, that would have been the same kind of conversation you were having with housewives, women who were not happy in their marriages. What did the feedback sound like and look like, Anna, for you at that time?
Well, it was, again, it's very interesting because there are big crossovers.
Yeah.
In your culture, Sangeeta, you say we're taught to be quiet, to let the men speak. You needn't think that that's Southeast Asian, my girl. That's men, that's patriarchy. And you have to be a very particular kind of person. You have to have a very particular kind of emotional and verbal toolkit to be able to do anything else. I really don't know how I got into this, except, as I say, I was the child at school. So I had it at school, at home, in my early jobs. So I was coming with that. I knew that there were people who didn't speak, they didn't talk, they didn't think that what they said was valuable or interesting. It wasn't interesting. To me, the magic of those shows, 14 years at Capital, 7 years at talkRADIO, 3 years, 2.5 years at LBC, and all the bits in between, the magic of those, and I'd use the word advisedly, is that they were always interesting. They may not have always been trustworthy. They may not have always been the brightest card in the pack. They may not have always been this, that, or the other, but they were always interesting, because you learned about women, you learned about people, you learned about men, you learned about how men and women saw each other. You learned about where they absolutely disconnected. I saw something, Emma, in the Sunday Times at the weekend. There's an agony aunt, I can't remember her name, I'm sorry, talking, she had a letter in from a girl who said, I'm 23, 4, early 20s. There are 4 or 5 of us. Everybody else has got a settled relationship with a boyfriend. I've just broken up with mine. And I can't bring myself to tell any of them because I feel so ashamed. Now, 2022, got a long way to go. And you've got a long way to go on a number of levels. I mean, I would say, if she rang me, the first thing I'd say is, well, they're not friends. Yeah. If you can't talk to them when you're actually wounded and hurt and unhappy, they're not friends.
Well, we've here at Magic, we're in the middle of it's our menopause month, so it's a month worth of conversations around menopause, and whilst huge strides have been made, I cannot get over how many women still feel shame about admitting they're not coping. That, you know, yes, and that the menopause has just been written off as this broad stroke of bloody hot flushes, excuse my language, and actually underneath all this, the physiological symptoms, which are debilitating and awful, there's this huge pressure to remain calm, to remain in control, to remain juggling all those balls. And that's the thing that is being fed back to us now, with all these listeners getting in touch and going, oh my God, I'm not the only one that's not coping. And there's still so much fear about coping in this world, about not being seen to be not coping. I cannot believe it. It still shocks me. It really does.
Well, it's what we have is the medicalization of things. And once a thing is medicalized, it's supposed to be dealt with.
Yes.
But it isn't.
Mm.
So, I wound up having that conversation with a 54-year-old in boots in Notting Hill Gate about 2 weeks ago, because I reached past her. I did say, excuse me, to get something. And as I took what I was taking away, she said, I might have wanted that. And I said, well, you didn't get it. I asked and I saw it first. She said, you brute. And we began a conversation. We never looked back. And we wound up and we had this and that and the other thing. And she showed me her cream that she liked and one thing and another. And we went outside the store. We're standing in the middle of the street. And she said, I suppose I could talk to you about my menopause. I said, yes, sweetheart, it's rather a long time ago, but I'll do my very best. And we started. And we were there for another 15 minutes. She said, do you do this with everybody? I said, everybody I can.
yeah.
Everybody I can. And that's, and then you tell me, we're looking at this and we got all this feedback still coming of people saying, gosh, it's not just me. Because you can't take this into a nice, neat plan and say, well, that's the menopause. There's the plan, that's the menopause, and now we don't have to worry about that anymore. It doesn't work like that. We're all individuals.
I think there's nothing better, I think, from doing the jobs that we're doing. I think for me personally, having with the Sunday surgery, feedback not just from the people that we spoke to, but listeners was so heartwarming. I'm wondering, Sangeeta, about the feedback that you're getting from other South Asian women and your much wider audience as well. What their feedback has been like, and some moments that have stuck with you.
I got so many emails, messages, Instagram, they find me. They obviously just hear the podcast and they research who I am, find me and write to me. And it's always about, thank you for talking about these things. Thank you for making me feel less alone. Thank you for making me feel less weird. I think somebody picked it up, and it's this kind of, I think you mentioned it, Emma, this idea we have that everybody else has it together and that we're going through stuff, but we're resolute and it doesn't affect us. And somehow when we feel something, that there's something wrong with us. And it's kind of created by media, it's created by, I don't even know where it comes from. And I think it's almost giving women permission to say, it's okay to be human. It's okay to fall apart. It's okay to have hot flushes, have mental health issues, whatever it might be. So over and over again, it's thank you for voicing things we think and feel, but feel unable to say in our own lives, unable to vocalize maybe loudly. It's young women. I get messages from like 18-year-olds in India who found me to say, I found you on this podcast and I didn't know you existed. And thank you for saying these things, because I think these things and I think there's something wrong with me when I say these things. I get messages from kind of older women. I get messages from the States. I did this whole podcast at the University of Berkeley in California. So these are 18-year-old, really, really smart South Asian American women. And they were saying the same thing to me that women in the UK say, that women in India say, women in South Asian culture say, and women outside of this culture say. It's the same stuff. It's issues with our bodies. It's expectations around what we're supposed to look like, feel like, smell like, have jobs or be mums or not be mums or have babies. There's all of this stuff that is expected of us that we shouldn't have to deal with or take on. And I think the pressure is immense. So I think the podcast allows women a space to say, she said that. So it's okay for me to feel like that,
Yeah, completely, absolutely. Anna, was there ever? I mean, I think I know the answer to this because your professionalism is palpable. But there were, I mean, for me, certainly there were times on the Sunday surgery where I really went home and just went, oh God, that was really difficult. And, you know, dealing with people's problems or listening to people's problems and listening to their worries and their anxieties and their concerns. Did that ever weigh heavy on you, or were you able to, I'm not just going to say we've got about 2-3 minutes left. Did that ever, how did you get yourself, how did you, you know, I used to go and have a shower, literally I had to go and have a shower and refresh myself, because sometimes taking the weight of your discussion on board is hard. It's not easy.
No, and it should be. If you're doing it seriously, it should be. Why should it be? Why should we be lighthearted about that? But to go back, just if I may, there's a very important word which dogs us all as women. And it dogs us whether this is International Women's Day or whatever. And that's perfectionism. And the answer is, must be perfect. Well, I was so obviously imperfect in every conceivable way. I'm the girl who said to her father when she was 19 years old, I've blown it. I've made a complete mess of everything. And my father, who was then in his 60s, very sweetly patted my hand and said, darling, I think there's a little time to run yet. But really, I felt, so to then answer your question, I learned to say no. And it's a very important little word. I learned to say, I'd love to talk to you, but I can't talk to you till tomorrow. I'm in the office from 9 o'clock. Here's the telephone number. I learned to say, I'll call you back after the show and you can have, and wrap it up and put it away. I learned to say no. And I do think that one of the things that is dangerous about seeing us as warm and wonderful human beings who've done our absolute damn best for years and years and years because we loved it, is to think that we have a kind of infallibility. We don't. There is a day when you go home, there are certain things that will stay with me for the rest of my life. And you go home and you sit down, and whether you have a cup of tea or a chai or cigarette or a double brandy, it doesn't make any difference. The thing sits there and you sit there thinking, what could I have done? What should I have said? Who could I talk to? In my case, I went off and talked to various people. They didn't come up with very much more than me.
Yeah.
But you do have to accept that you're not going to be able to fix everything for everybody. And you do have to be able to accept that if you want to do this, you do a daily show. A daily show is graft. It's wonderful graft, but it's graft. If you're going to do a daily show, there has got to be a moment where you say, stop, nothing, no more, not talking. Sorry. No, Mary, I love you, darling. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Sorry, tomorrow.
I want Mary. I need Mary.
And I have to learn. I learned it was very important for me because I had been a girl who always felt that she didn't try hard enough, and I must try harder. And I actually got to the stage where I nearly fell over. I was so tired, emotionally tired. And then you have nothing to give. So you learn to say no. And when I had my son, that was the big breakthrough. I remember walking down a road, seeing a woman in distress, child 2 years old, in a buggy, and thinking,
yeah,
you have a hierarchy of needs here. You take care of the child first. And once you got him to where you're taking him, if you come back and she's still there, that's fine. You can do it then, but don't do that over the head of your child.
It's very difficult. We've got some questions coming in, which is super exciting. And we've got about 10 minutes left. Sangeeta, just in a couple of lines, there are undoubtedly people listening, I hope, who are inspired and might very well want to go and start their own podcasts. From the accidental podcaster, what is your best advice?
Spend the maximum time thinking about why you want to create a podcast. Don't do it because everybody's doing a podcast. Think about what you have to say that is of value, that people need in the world, and what is it that you're bringing that is unique to that. So would be it doesn't matter what, people always ask me, what's the equipment, what's the technology? None of that matters. You can Google it and you figure it out. But think about why you're doing what you're doing.
Anna, I've got a question for you. Are you ready to take the questions?
Yes.
This is coming from Cam, who says, does Anna think that people overshare now compared with the 70s, who probably didn't share enough, and how much is too much?
Oh, what an intelligent question. Yes, there are certain people who do overshare, and they overshare because it is a way of controlling the relationship between them and the other person. And if you feel that, I mean, there are a whole series of things which I don't want to talk about. I'm not the right person to talk to. I have a very warm memory of a doctor who once stopped me as I launched into something and said, this is not my area of expertise. Would you talk to my colleague? He's much better at it than I am. I emulate that woman. So Cam, yes, I do. And I submit with respect that if you're asking this question, and if you're asking this question in this format, this is something that has happened to you. And it has made you uncomfortable two ways round. First of all, by what you had to hear, but secondly, by your response to it, which wasn't warm and kind and generous, but was actually rather, what's that about? Why is she telling me, what's that? So just back off very gently. I think people overshare in the hope that they can get to the bottom of what it feels about in a fashionable, trendy, cool way, which of course any one of the three of us would tell you is no way to travel.
There is the genius of Anna Raeburn. It like literally on it goes, on it goes. Wonderful.
Impressive.
Thank you.
Sangeeta, this is coming from Audrey, who says that she is thoroughly enjoying the discussion. Thank you very much, Audrey. Appreciate all the comments on safety and space. She says, though, but we're now multimedia. Has that eroded somewhat, and does it matter?
Has the sense of safety eroded? Is that the question?
I'm guessing, yeah. I'm guessing that that a radio show used to be a one-time only listen. You couldn't listen to it again. There was no way of tracing people. But now, I guess,
Audrey, thank you so much for listening. So I guess the answer is yes and no. I think we are more visible. We are on social media. People can find out, what we're about and everything. But I think to a degree, we control our narratives. And I think how much you kind of allow out into the world of your life on social media depends entirely on you. So I think then you are responsible. We are responsible for our own safety, I think, in some ways. And I think each of us must think about that, because I share a lot of stuff on my platforms, but there are some things I don't talk about because that feels too personal. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I feel like we must try and manage our sense of safety in that sense.
Anna, does that resonate with you?
That's an extremely good answer, because it opens the door to something else, which is having a sense of privacy. You either, in my time, you had a sense of privacy, and the sense of privacy was actually to do with your independence and your maturity as a human being. It was part of being a human being. It was healthy. I'm going to use that word because I hate wellness. I really do. But I think that now we have a kind of, we are in danger of anything goes. And I'm with Sangeeta. I don't believe anything goes. I believe there are things which are better I might talk to Sangeeta about. If I were lucky, Sangeeta might talk to me about, but we would not talk about them over all sorts of other media with all sorts of other people looking in, because this changes the transaction.
Yeah. And certainly when I was doing the Sunday surgery at Radio 1, oh my goodness me, the respect that was given to privacy, safeguarding, forward avenues for people, so that, because I think as well, I was always very conscious of opening the lid, and you can't do that with people. You can't do that with raw emotion and then say, thanks very much, it's been lovely speaking to you. You can't do that. You can't do that's hugely irresponsible.
I tend to add, so if we're talking about, I don't know, sexual harassment, there's a whole bunch of links I put in every episode. So if somebody wants to talk to someone about something that's triggering, then they can go and do that, because I think that's, again, our responsibility, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I think who you talk to and how you talk to them is now very different, and it is fractionalized in a lot of different directions. And I think you have to find the person that you want to talk to, the podcast that you want to interact with, the radio show that you're prepared to be part of. I don't think you can say, because it's all out there, it's all fine. I don't think it is. There will always be a significant number of people for whom it is the very opposite of fine.
Sangeeta, there's a question that's come in, and this is coming from, it's Anon, and this is definitely something that I think we've all got a take on. I'd like to get your take on it, Sangeeta, which is, does it ever feel like you have to have extreme stories, or the most extreme stories, to draw people in? Do you feel like a pressure? Is there a pressure? Is it, I'm sure Anna's got a take on this as well. It'd be interesting to see what you say.
No, I don't think so at all. I think what makes us human, we're all connected by similar things. What do we want? We want love, we want understanding, we want affection. And I think as long as those stories touch upon those critical parts of being human, that's what makes a really interesting conversation, or podcast, or radio interview. I'm certainly not after some sort of sensationalist, oh my God, I'm going to go out there and find the most out there stories. Sometimes they happen, but that's not the intention.
Yeah. Anna, I know that, yeah.
I couldn't say that better, because that's actually what it's about. You're not looking to be shocked. The story about the imam and the carrots is only funny because all three of us laughed. It isn't, she wasn't trying to shock us, she couldn't get this. She's far too sensible. The deal is not that you're looking for those terrible stories. And actually what happens is that you hear very small stories, and they are enormously moving.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I think, and also, this is life. That person did do that and did like that.
Yes.
And if that person is one person who's made their way to you on your podcast, or through the telephone lines, then there's a whole heap more that are doing exactly the same thing. And it is always just the tip of the iceberg, and that's why it resonates, is because the people that find their way to you, that in that moment decide to pick the phone up, or in that moment decide to share their stories, are doing it because you just know that you're speaking on behalf of lots of people that feel like that. And to be able to draw that out is I've always felt like, I'm very proud of the work that we've all done. On that note, ladies, I'm going to have to draw this conversation to an end.
Thank you. You've done so well. Thank you very much for sharing this for us, Emma. It was lovely.
Isn't it been
wonderful.
fun? Just lovely.
It's been amazing.
It's so nice to meet you both, and thank you very much to everybody at home for watching. Thank you, of course, to Anna Raeburn. Anna, you're blogging as well, aren't you? What's it called?
Called Analog.
The Analog, yeah.
It's called Analog. Like it's called Analog because I am analog. I'm about the most undigital person you're ever going to meet. So it's called Analog.
It's a great read. It's a great read.
It varies a lot, but it's been a very, very good experience for me, because I don't have to give in to anybody else. I just have to do what I do.
It's a cracking read. Check out Analog. And thank you so much as well to Sangeeta. If you haven't already, please follow the Masala Podcast, because they're absolutely wonderful. It's lovely to meet you both. Enjoy your evening. Thank you to the Radio Academy and all the guys backstage for making this happen and asking me to be part of this. It's an absolute pleasure. And do as well, if you enjoyed this one, spread the word about future events and our brand new podcast as well, and the benefits of being a member of the Radio Academy. Long live the Radio Academy. If you missed any of this conversation, it will be up on the Academy's website. So that is it from us. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday evening. And I'll be back on air tomorrow between 1 and 4, playing lots of Michael Bublé, probably. Take care for now. Bye-bye.
Bye.